Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolfe. In a suburb of Baltimore, there lives one particularly extraordinary member of the human species. Most of his kind go about their daily business without noticing the goings-on of other animals. But this one, Peter Kaestner, has a specially developed eye for birds. On February 9th, 2024, Peter spotted an orange-tufted spider hunter on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. And just like that, he became the first human on planet Earth to catalog 10,000 bird species. Over 60 years ago, as a young child, Peter got into birds thanks to his brother Hank, and he's been obsessed with documenting them ever since. Now, ducks, vultures, hummingbirds, and boobies, for example, are all parts of different bird families, and today there are around 249 of them. Well, by 1986, Peter was recognized by Guinness World Records as the first person to see a representative of each of those families. And 3 years later, there was even a bird named after him, the Growleria kaestneri. Peter joined me from the Philippines to tell that tale.
I heard a bird that was different. It went sort of, three whistles and a little pause after the first, and doot, doot, doot. I made a tape recording of it. And when I played the bird's song back to it, it responded and came closer. It thought that there was another male in its territory and it was going to defend it. But it didn't respond terribly quickly, and it took a total of 45 minutes. And after about 40 minutes, I'm standing on this little road above Monte Redondo. Next thing I know, the bird is calling behind me. I said, how in the world did that bird get behind me? So I crawled up into, it was a very steep slope. I crawled up into the forest. There's a tiny little clearing, played the tape again, and the bird popped right up onto a fallen log. And I said, my goodness, this is something new for Colombia. Now, I'm a scientist by training. I have a degree in biology from Cornell University. So I didn't say, oh my God, it's a new species, because I needed to do the work first. I needed to find a list of the birds I knew it was a Growleria antpitta, so I needed to get a list of all the Growleria antpitta in South America and make sure it wasn't one of them before I knew that it was a new species. But I knew it was a new bird for Colombia because I knew all the Colombian birds by heart. But it was exciting, even if it wasn't new. But as soon as I got home, I got to a book of all the birds of South America and very, very quickly ascertained that it was a new species. And it was a really amazing moment. And it was probably the most interesting thing is I went back in 2022, and they're now feeding my bird in a reserve that I helped establish with the American Bird Conservancy above the town of Guayabital. And when I saw the bird the second time, I had even a greater emotional attraction feeling when I saw it. It just really just tugged at my heart to see this bird that I had been the first Westerner. I don't know if any indigenous people knew about it, but certainly it was the first time it is known to science, and it was really very, very moving.
What did it feel like to have it named after you? I mean, in some sense, it's an enormous honor, and also like you're just a guy. You're also just a guy.
Yeah, it's weird. I studied evolution and taxonomy at Cornell. And in fact, I took an evolutionary biology course from one of the real pioneers in evolutionary biology, a guy named Dr. Brown, who had worked at Harvard with Ernst Mayr, who created the biological species concept, which is the main way that species are defined and recognized. And one of the things we talked about there were eponyms, the idea of naming a bird after a person rather than some descriptive name. And when Dr. Gary Stiles, who is the ornithologist that described the bird, when he asked if I wanted to have it named after myself, I said yes. And I don't know if it's just ego or what, but even though I was trained not to do that, when the time came, I said yes. And it's really interesting because I am a very, very well-known person in Colombia. I can't go anywhere in Colombia and meet bird watchers that haven't heard of Grilleria caesneri. So it has given me some opportunities to do things that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It is, as an example, the area where I discovered the bird, the forest is gone. It's turned into a cattle pasture. And in 2002, when I saw at a news spot that the bird was being protected and fed and turned into an ecotourism opportunity, I was able to make a connection with the local NGO that was working to protect it and the American Bird Conservancy, which had the resources to buy a significant portion of land. And because of those connections, we now have a very significant reserve that's been created just the last year in the eastern Andes of Colombia to protect this bird. So I guess, having it with my name means more to me than if it hadn't been. And, maybe that's something that has contributed to its conservation, I hope.
Is there a place on the planet that has the highest concentration of novel birds for you?
Yes, I think it's still Indonesia. It's been Indonesia for a long time. I've been to probably 30 different islands in Indonesia. I've been all over Indonesia, and there's still a lot of birds I need in Indonesia. Another place is the Philippines. I'm in the Philippines today. I saw 2 new birds this morning. So my list is now 10,004.
Yes. Congratulations.
Everyone counts. And the Philippines has a lot of really hard birds. And I've been, let's see, this is, I think, my 6th or 7th trip to the Philippines. And there's still, I don't know, 60 or 70 birds that I need in the Philippines.
What makes them so hard to find?
The habitat destruction is a huge problem here. Some of them are just plain rare, and we're not quite sure why. You just don't see them around very often. Some of them are on islands that are difficult to get to. I just went to Zamboanga last month, right after I got 10,000. I went over to Zamboanga. Zamboanga, until about a year ago, was off limits. And I know I had a friend that worked at the U.S. Embassy and just left about a year ago. She was not allowed to go to the island of Mindanao at all in the 2 years that she worked in Manila for security reasons. And we birdwatch in Mindanao a lot, but the southwestern corner and the Sulu archipelago, where there are, another 10 birds or so, it's completely off limits. It's very, very dangerous over there.
What part of the world has the least concentration of birds?
Well, the north. I mean, Antarctica has very few species. There's nothing there but ice.
Right. That's what I figured. When you are close, physically close to seeing a bird that you need to add to your list, and you're just waiting, there's nothing you can do just to wait. What is going through your mind?
If it's not calling, or if it's not responding to a call that you're using from your tape recorder, there really is nothing you can do. I mean, you're very much at the mercy of the birds. So I guess, there's a lot of praying and hoping that the bird comes and trying to get the positive energy moving in the right direction. But it's one of the neat things about birds. I mean, you can do all the preparation you want. You can have all your equipment ready. You can have all your books. The bird's not there. You're not going to see it.
Which sounds meditative and incredibly humbling. You are totally at the mercy of these birds, and you always will be, which is what makes it so exhilarating when you see a new one.
Yeah, if you saw every bird, which is impossible, but if you did, take a lot of the fun out of it. I mean, the fact that sometimes you dip, and that's the word we use is dipping. If you dip a bird, then it keeps you humble. It gives you a reason to go back. during the lockdown, I went to Kenya and we looked for a bird called the South Par White-eye in the Chulu Hills of southern Kenya and dipped a little booger. And within minutes, I was already plotting my next trip to northern Tanzania because he's found on the other side of the border. And 3 months later, I had the South Par White-eye in Tanzania. So I'm constantly trying to figure out how I'm going to get something if I miss it.
That was Peter Kaestner. When we get back, the surprising story of how he became the first person ever to spot 10,000 bird species.
I'm choking up just thinking about it. It was just extraordinary.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me.
Not to put too fine a point on it. Say I'm the only bee in your bonnet. Make a little birdhouse in your soul. While you're at it, leave the nightlight on inside the birdhouse in your soul. Not to put too fine a point on it. Say I'm the only bee in your bonnet. Make a little birdhouse in your soul.
This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Just like every bird is special, every birder is special. It takes a special type of person to not only love birds, but also to learn everything about them, from color patterns to shapes to bird songs, which is what makes Peter Kaestner a rare bird. He's worked in diplomacy, volunteered with the Peace Corps, and since 1978 has been leading international bird tours, including with rock jumper birding adventures. And in 2023, he was appointed an ambassador for the American Bird Conservancy. But what he's most known for is becoming the first person to document 10,000 bird species. It happened in February of 2024, but it didn't happen exactly the way he thought it would. Now, when people keep track of the birds they see, it's called a life list. And many of them use online databases like eBird from Cornell University, and they also turn to organizations like the IOC, that's the International Ornithological Committee, for resources on everything having to do with birds. But in the birding community, keeping track of them is mostly by the honor system, which is how Peter's story gets complicated by a much lesser-known birder by the name of Jason Mann. Here's how we got into it. Okay, now there are, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you will, there are currently, as far as we know, 11,032 living species of birds on planet Earth, yeah?
According to the IOC checklist.
Okay.
There are two major checklists, IOC and eBird.
I want to ask about the 10,000. Now, the danger of asking about the 10,000 is that your experience getting there obviously took your whole life. And your journey towards 10,000 got sort of, I don't know, what would you say, interrupted or sidetracked or derailed by someone named Jason Mann, who came very late to the game as soon as you made your 10,000 approach public. He claimed to have reached the 10,000 mere moments before you did. And when everything went viral, Jason Mann made a public statement and conceded the record and said he would, quote, like to support Peter as the first person to 10,000 birds. You were a class act about it the entire time. So I just wanted to say that happened and then kind of let you take it from there. I'd also really love to hear about the moment that you got to 10,000, but I also recognize that getting to that 10,000 had this other weird element along with it. So how do you tell this story?
Before last September, there was a website called surfbirds.com where all the major listers put their numbers, and you just put a number out there. And sometime in September, October, the website went south and all the data disappeared. And I had read somewhere that the Guinness Book of Records used surfbirds as their authority for determining who has seen the most birds in the world. So as it disappeared, I would go on and put my number out there to make sure that it was there, since it was number one, because I didn't want somebody coming along who was, 8,000 birds and put it on surfbirds, and then he would be the number one. several times I put my total back onto Surfbirds as it would crash and everything would disappear. And at one point, I'd made a screenshot because I wanted to send it around to my 3,000 mostly birding Facebook friends and see if anybody had any idea what was going on. And one of my screenshots is from the 27th of October. And in that screenshot, Jason Mann has 9,604, I think was his number. And that was something he had just put up because the website had been down and you had to put your number back. So that was his claim at that time. So in January, when I learned that he had put his numbers in another website called iGoterra and that he had over 9,900 birds, I was a bit surprised because I knew that he had just in October claimed 9,600, and it's a pretty big jump, 300 birds in a couple of months. So I tried to track him down and eventually got an email for him, sent him the email. I asked him if he was going for 10,000, which is pretty obvious. And he said that he needed to talk to his family about what to do next. And this is in early January. So anyway, next thing I know, he's like 17 birds behind me, and I'm starting to get nervous. At about the same time in January, an article was published in Birding Magazine, which is the journal of record for the American Birding Association. It's 15,000 or so people. And in that, an article that I had actually written back in June, but it was published in January. In that, I laid out my plan for getting to 10,000 sometime in the summer. So I was hoping that Jason Mann would see that and think that he had until the summer to beat me. And I did something sneaky. I went off to Taiwan without telling anybody. Only like 3 or 4 people knew. And I got 15 birds. So that got me within 20 birds of 10,000. Now, the reason that I am here now is I'm doing a rock jumper tour, and I knew that I could get those 20 birds on my tour so I could get to 10,000 in March instead of in the summer. And I was hoping that that would be enough of a change to beat Mr. Mann. Well, the last day I was in Taiwan, I got word that Jason Mann was in Colombia seeing about 10 birds a day and that he would get to the record in about 4 or 5 days. So my initial thought was, he's going to beat me. There's no way I can beat him. And I'm going to Philippines anyway in March. It would be a waste of money to go to the Philippines in February when I'm already going to be there in March. And it just didn't make any sense to me. But I got home and my wife said, "You got to be kidding. You've been trying for this for all your life. You've got to get on the next plane and go to the Philippines and try to beat this guy." And I'm thinking, there's no way I can beat him because he's going faster than I am. He's in a place with tons and tons of birds. Unless he has a car accident or gets horribly sick and he's in the hospital for a couple of days, there's no way he's going to beat me. So I have an older brother that started me birding when I was 2, Hank Kaestner. And Hank calls himself Coach K. So Coach K and Kimberly say, "Get on the next plane." In fact, Hank even said, "Look, I'll pay for your ticket." So I arrived home from Taiwan late Friday night, 6 o'clock on Sunday morning. I'm in an airplane flying back to Manila. And as it turned out, Jason probably beat me by several days. I saw my 10,000th bird, the spider hunter, on the 9th of February. But the thing is that Jason did a big fancy produced newsletter announcement. It was quite long and had some little stickers and things. Obviously, he put a lot of effort into it. And that was published within 12 hours of the moment that I saw my bird. And what I did is I saw the bird. I took a picture of it. Fortunately, it jumped right out in the sun. It was beautiful. I got a nice picture of it. And within 2 or 3 minutes, I had posted that on Facebook with a little sign that said 10,000. I didn't claim that I was first. I didn't claim anything. I just said, "Here's my 10,000 bird." And because of the contrast between Jason Mann's claim and my announcement, I think that that's why it went viral. And that's why there was so much interest and there was so much incredible support for me, which I'm choking up just thinking about it. It was just extraordinary. Absolutely, hundreds and hundreds of people coming to my defense, and it really has been an unbelievable experience for me. Excuse me.
It's okay. It's interesting because on the one hand, you had this moment of seeing the orange tufted spider hunter, your 10,000th bird. It had a deeper story going on than it would have without this drama, right?
Yes, because what I needed to do was to get it out onto Facebook immediately. I didn't know where Jason Mann stood, whether he had actually seen his bird. I didn't know if he was in the hospital in Colombia or had a car accident or whatever it was. I just needed to get there. My wife said, "Go and get it as fast as you can," and I followed her excellent advice. Because if I had just been laid back and said, "Look, he's going to get it. I'm going to be there in March. I'll just do it."
What I'm curious about, though, is if it hadn't been for Jason Mann, when you saw your 10,000th bird, you would have had a really wonderful experience. It would have been joyful, no questions or drama. It would have been, here I am having this experience I've been aiming for my whole life, right?
Absolutely. And I had planned to do it with a specific bird, the tufted puffin at Haystack Rocks in Oregon. And I had told a bunch of people, and lots of people were planning to come, and it was going to be a big celebration. I'm having a big banner made. It starts off with my brother's spark bird on one side and the tufted puffin on the other, and pictures of my wife and my brother Hank, and birds representing Cornell University, the sapsucker, the whistling swan, which represents the Maryland Ornithological Society, and the hummingbird from the American Bird Conservancy. And I mean, all these crazy things that was going to be so meaningful in so many ways. And I was going to be able to celebrate it with people that I cared very much about. And yet here I am in the woods of Mindanao with a couple of Filipino strangers, really nice guys. But I mean, it was a very, very different kind. And my banner, instead of a really nice color banner, just the word 10,000 that I printed up
On a piece of paper.
on Saturday before I got my flight back to the Philippines.
Yeah, so at the same time, like you had what maybe it sounds like you're saying you had sort of an anticlimactic, this was not how I pictured it, event when you got to 10,000, but at the same time, as you said, this drama with Jason Mann and what happened in that whole story also had hundreds of people coming to your defense and speaking out about you and your character and how they see this story and standing up for you. That gets you emotional. So on the one hand, yeah, you were kind of robbed of the experience that you hoped for, but at the same time, you got an entirely different one that was also quite meaningful.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely beautiful. And you know, it's interesting you use that word. One of the I have been very careful not to criticize Jason Mann in my public posts. I let my supporters support me. One of the supporters used that there's a phrase, stolen valor, when people claim that they have a military decoration or a medal that they didn't earn. Somebody mentioned that to me, and it sort of resonates a little bit. That it's kind of what it looks like.
I know that not all birders are the same, but it's the honor of the whole thing. And so what I'm hearing you say is, not one of us would do this. Like, one of us, really? That's not the vibe of being a birder, right?
There's a saying in the American Birding Association that there are a million ways to bird. And the reason is that everybody does it their own way. So it doesn't mean that you have to count the birds. Some people don't count birds. Some people only look at birds in their backyard. Some people don't give a rat's patooey what the bird is called. They just enjoy the birds. Some people make up stuff and try to get fame and notoriety. And that happens. I knew a guy when I was growing up who'd go out, and every time he'd see him, he'd report a rare bird and just flew around the corner, just went over the dike. It just, he was the only one that saw it. And after a while, we just stop listening to him. I actually lied once.
Oh, tell me about it.
I was birding in southwestern Costa Rica with a guy named Paul Koopmans, who was one of the great birders. Unfortunately, he died very young of a brain tumor, a Belgian birder, had fabulous ears. He could hear everything. And he had bowel movements that you could set your watch to. So one morning we were birding at 9 o'clock, so he goes off to the bushes. And while he was in the bushes, I saw the bird, the target bird that we were looking for down there, the black-eared ant tanager, and her black-cheeked ant tanager. And anyway, I didn't yell to him that I'd seen it. And as he's coming back up the road, I said, gosh, at the end of the day, I can't say that I saw this bird when I didn't tell him when I saw it. I'm in a real pickle here. So I said, well, what I'll do is I'll yell out that I'm looking at it now. And then when he gets up here, it'll disappear. So I just yelled out that I'm looking at it, even though I wasn't. By the time he got up, the bird was there. He showed up. It didn't work. I made it up. And the bird just, he comes up and says, yeah, there it is.
Have you thought about using this manifestation technique in other ways?
That's the last time I ever did anything like that. I really felt terrible. I figured that God was punishing me.
Just a little wink, a little nudge. Not so much a punishment.
Don't try that again, Buster.
I see you.
I saved your bacon today, but you don't get to.
How did you celebrate when you got to 10,000?
I had a Magnum bar with my newfound friends.
Posted a picture on Facebook and
went back to my 1-star hotel and sat there and talked to my wife and just sort of started watching the almost immediate reaction occur.
That was Peter Kaestner. After the break, a lightning round of questions, including what species of bird would Peter want to be if he were reincarnated? And what bird does he think would be most suited for an appearance at the Met Gala?
It has some crazy curly feathers that come out the back, and it's got just all kinds of multicolors. But the head is the most amazing thing. It's like fantastic.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise.
This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. Peter Kaestner has seen more birds than anybody on the planet, and his entire life is devoted to knowing them better and sharing his love of birds with the world, which gets us to our final segment. Are you ready for a bird lightning round?
Lightning round. Do I have a choice?
No, you don't have a choice.
Then I'm ready.
Okay, great. Okay, a bird list watching. This is all your personal preferences. There's no wrong answers. What bird blows your freaking mind?
Cundinamarca amphitta. Last time I saw it, I just swelled up.
That's the one named after you.
It's mine.
What is the most misunderstood bird?
Ooh, my. Crows, maybe? A lot of people sort of think crows are trashy, or I don't know, but crows are very intelligent. There's a crow on the island of New Caledonia. Google it. You'll find an amazing study of the intelligence of this New Caledonian crow, where it goes through a 7 or 8 step process. If you have a container full of water and it has something floating on it, and the level of the water is so low below the top of the container that the bird can't get into it, so they put rocks into it and it raises the level of the water up so that they can get it. there's a sequence of different things the bird has to do, and he has to remember to do them and in what sequence they are to get the final prize at the end. And it's learned it, which is, I mean, it's like, I don't know, an 8 or 10-year-old human can maybe do that kind of stuff.
What is the biggest bird you've seen?
The bird with the biggest wingspan is a wandering albatross. The tallest bird I've seen is an ostrich, which stands about 8 feet tall. And the heaviest flying bird I've seen is probably the great bustard or the Cory bustard, which weigh about 35 to 40 pounds.
Smallest bird you've seen?
The hummingbird, the smallest bird in the world.
Was it so cute?
It's cute. It's tiny. It's found in Cuba, near the Bay of Pigs.
What bird has your favorite song?
Ooh, there's a very common bird that I see almost every day that has a very, very, very happy song. It's called a Carolina wren. And it goes, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea. And it's just a very nice, rollicking song. In Europe, there's a bird called a robin, a European robin, that has an ethereal, very, very high-pitched, very complex call. And that's a beautiful thing. Every time I hear it, I stop and listen to it. And then finally, the winter wren is another bird, a tiny, tiny little bird. It's an enormous voice with a very, very complex and melodic song.
And there's this other bird, my dear friend Michelle, who's also a birder. She showed me this David Attenborough video about this bird that can imitate chainsaws, camera clicks.
Yes.
What's that one?
Lyrebird from Australia.
That was a camera shutter. And now a camera with a motor drive. And now the sounds of foresters and their chainsaws working nearby.
One question. What the hell?
That's a very good question.
Do you have an answer for me? Or
No. There are lots of birds that imitate other birds, but why would you imitate just anything you hear? It's just crazy.
And so well.
Yes.
So well. I mean, that must freak out people who hear it.
Ambulances and things, you're sitting there and you think there's a policeman coming behind you. Crazy.
What is a holy grail bird that you've not yet seen? And if you would see it, it would drop you to your knees.
The ivory-billed woodpecker. And that is truly the holy grail and probably in the whole world, because it certainly is in the United States. There was a decision that the Fish and Wildlife Service had to make last summer on whether or not they were going to declare it extinct. And at that time, some people gave data to the Fish and Wildlife Service that they claimed showed that it was there, and they had some very, very grainy drone images and things. With the number of high quality bird photographers in the world and the number of people looking for this bird, the fact that every image that comes up is awful, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense.
My friend Ashley would like to know, what bird do you think would be best suited to go to the Met Gala?
Probably Wilson's bird of paradise. Has a cobalt blue bare head, and it has some crazy curly feathers that come out the back, and it's got just all kinds of multicolors, but the head is the most amazing thing. It's like fantastic. And the golden pheasant, another, it looks like you took a palette of all the brightest colors you had and just sort of threw them together on this beautiful bird with a long tail. Once I was birding in China back in the 1980s, and I heard one calling up on a slope, and I climbed up the other side of this very steep and very pointy little ridge, And I got to the top of the ridge and the bird was calling on the other side and it was foggy. And the bird was stuck because it couldn't take off and fly down the valley because of the fog. It couldn't see where it was going. So it was just walking nervously back and forth along the branch of the pine tree, no more than 50 feet in front of me. It was just a spectacular encounter with a really, really beautiful bird.
Oftentimes, for those who believe in life after death or signs from beyond, people come back in the form of a bird. And they're considered often a wink from the universe or God or whatever. Do you ever get that feeling about birds, that they are not entirely always of this world and maybe something from a little bit beyond?
Yes, but not for the reason that you just pointed out. Having lived in India for over 5 years, I do understand sort of the Hindu idea of reincarnation, but I don't see birds that way. But birds do things that sort of rival the pyramids. I mean, if you look at how the pyramids are built, it doesn't make any sense how the pyramids are built. There's a bird that nests in Alaska called a bar-tailed godwit. After it breeds, and the young birds are coming out of the nest, hatch out of the egg, and after several months of feeding, they get themselves nice and fat. And the sun starts heading south, and they say, time to fly home. So they fly from Alaska to New Zealand without stop, without checking a map, without a GPS, flying over the Pacific Ocean. They lose most of their body weight doing it. They're flying at like 40 miles an hour for over 2 weeks, like 16, 17 days. And they arrive at the exact same place every year. How does that happen? A hummingbird beats its wings 60 times a second, and they fly from Florida to South America. How do they do that? There are so many things that are wondrous about birds that it's almost a spiritual moment just contemplating what they do.
If reincarnation was real and you were definitely going to come back as a bird, what bird would that be?
It would be an albatross.
Why an albatross?
Albatrosses are gigantic. Albatrosses nest on little islands in the southern oceans, and they take off and they fly around the world. And after 4 or 5 years, after flying around the world so many times, they come back to this little speck in the ocean where they were hatched, and they make babies. There's an albatross on Midway Atoll. There's a couple of albatrosses in the North Pacific, which are a little bit out of the ordinary. There's one called a Laysan albatross. And this particular one is called Wisdom. And it was banded 70 years ago by a guy named Chan Robbins. And he's still alive and came back again this year. So the idea of an albatross that flies for long periods of time, as long as there's wind, it doesn't have to flap its wings. It flies using dynamic soaring, using the difference in the velocity between the air at the surface, which is slowed by the friction against the ocean, and the wind that's blowing up above it. Using that velocity difference, it flies and loops and just can fly forever. Fantastic birds.
I'm also anthropomorphizing it and thinking they also have such giant wingspans, which would be good for hugging. But that's me. How do you think the world would be different if everybody loved birds as much as you do?
I think it would be good, because one of the things that is a direct result of birding, and international birding especially, but birding in general, is a better appreciation for the environment and for the things that we do to the environment that harm birds and, by extension, everybody else. And birds, to beat a metaphor to death are the canary in a coal mine. And they are all very often a symbol of what we've done wrong in terms of habitat destruction, pollution by chemicals. I mean, one of the great examples, when I was growing up in the early 1970s, it was discovered that DDT was causing the egg shells of certain raptors to become very thin, and the birds would sit on the eggs and crush them. And as a result, the bald eagle and the peregrine falcon both became extremely rare in the United States and critically endangered, or maybe not critically, but certainly endangered. And because we understood what was causing it, we were able to stop the use of DDT, and now peregrine falcons are reasonably common and bald eagles are doing great. Same thing happened in India back in the 1990s. A couple of decades later, the vultures were all dying. Vultures used to be very, very abundant in India. And people were using a new analgesic called diclofenac to administer to old cows so they would have a more peaceful old life and death. They didn't want them to suffer. And once the cow died, the vultures would come and eat it, and the diclofenac killed the vultures. And we learned that only in the 1990s, and the vultures that were abundant in the Indian subcontinent are still critically endangered. You never see vultures anymore, except for in a few very, very isolated places where they're feeding them and trying to have them come back. So yeah, these birds are a very critical part of the equation of the human species, understanding what's going on in our environment, largely because they are so visible and they are attractive. We like to look at them, and when they're not around, we notice it. It might not be the same for shrews or voles or some small mammal that you would never bump into.
So take care of the birds, take care of the world.
Exactly.
I know there are people listening to our conversation.
Hope there are.
Yeah, one or two out there. And they are thinking, God, I feel really inspired to start finding more birds, but I also feel like I'm never going to catch up with this guy. And there's 11,000 out there, more than 11,000 out there. I feel overwhelmed with the idea of logging birds, but I also think that's a kind of cool idea and would make a nice hobby. What would you say to sort of nudge them to get started on this?
There are a million ways to bird your way. If you want to bird in Hartford, Connecticut, and see the birds in your backyard and go around, then that's fabulous. If you want to take a trip to Costa Rica and see the quetzal and the toucans and some beautiful hummingbirds, go for it. Birding is a team sport. If you include other people, if you involve other people, it makes it better for everybody. The best way to learn how to bird is to bird with other people, because if you open up a book and there's 700 or 800 birds in it, it's going to be very, very difficult to figure out what you're looking at. There are a couple of good tools out there. Merlin, which is a free app from Cornell University, is fabulous, and especially new people that turn on the sound ID and it highlights the bird as it's singing, so you can go back and play it again, and it'll so you can actually, it's fat. I love it. I absolutely love it. And one of the reasons I love it is I'm 70 years old. My high frequency hearing is not as good as it used to be. I can still hear high frequencies, but if the bird is far away and it's very soft, I usually can't hear it. So I use Merlin. I turn on Merlin, and I was up in northern Michigan this summer and recorded 4 or 5 birds that I couldn't hear, but they were singing. And then once I knew what they were, I could sort of focus on the song or go in that direction and actually hear them, see them myself. So it's a wonderful thing. Join a bird club. All the bird clubs have outings, so it's a great way to go out with other people. There are a million ways to bird, but I think there are probably 999,991 birders are all great people. There are very, very few people that are birders that I wouldn't want to spend time with. So it's a great way of meeting people. It's a great way of getting outside, getting a little exercise. Getting out in nature is good for your mental health. Getting some exercise, of course, is good for your health. It's good for your mental acuity to learn new things and to have to learn the songs and learn what the birds look like. So there are so many things that birds do. I mean, that's not even talking about the wonder of the birds, the incredible way they fly, the beauty of a scarlet tanager or a Blackburnian warbler or a bluebird or a cardinal or a blue jay. I mean, there's so many common birds that are absolutely extraordinary.
I'm a fan of the common swift.
It's the world's fastest bird flying in a straight line. The peregrine falcon flies faster when it stoops, when it's flying down, but it's got gravity helping it. But the common swift flies 100 miles an hour flat. Common swifts sleep in the air. They fly up to 10,000 feet and fly around in circles at night, sleeping. There's a bird in Europe called an alpine swift that migrates to South Africa and never lands. The albatrosses do that. They fly for years, picking squid off the surface at night. They fly along.
So I'm hearing you say that in addition to the mental health, physical health, psychosocial health, birding also ups the awe in your life.
Yes, absolutely. I see birding as like a jewel with 30 or 40 different facets. I mean, I have a scientific interest, a social interest, all these different things. I'm not even sure I know all the facets of birding and what it does for me.
Peter Kaestner, thank you so much for talking with me, and congratulations on your giant achievement.
Thank you, Karen. It's a real pleasure talking to you.
If you weren't a birder before, I know you're going to be now, so we'll have a link to all the resources that Peter mentioned at ctpublic.org/audacious. This show is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin DeMartinez, Meg Fitzgerald, Robin Doyon-Aitken, and Meg Dalton at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. Special thanks to our former intern, Sajina Shrestha, who first pitched us the idea for this show. If you like this episode, which of course you did, check out the one we did about uncommon emotional support animals, including a pig, a sugar glider, and the noble pigeon. And we did a show about how the way we train our dogs says a lot about us, from search and rescue to police canines, and to the story of Laika, the first animal to orbit the Earth. You can find all of them at ctpublic.org/audacious or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, will you write us a review and rate us? That really helps to convince the algorithm to share our show with people who haven't heard it yet. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Thanks for listening.
Maybe it's a common or Arctic loon. I'm eating muffins with a nightingale, Atlantic puffin, Montezuma quail, Virginia rail, California black rail. If you try to rhyme bird names, you would fail. Black-footed albatross, Cassin's outlet, American bittern, Brewer's blackbird, mountain bluebird, brown booby, indigo bunting, bush tit, canvasback northern cardinal, gray catbird, chickadee, American coot, cormorant, cowbird, American crow, common ground dove, Eurasian collared dove, Dowitcher. That's a bird! That's a bird! This the bird song, yo! That's a bird!